Hello everyone, and welcome to the MagM Coloring Book Tutorials. We will be exploring the different coloring techniques you can use to bring your pencil crayon skills to the next level. You're going to need a set of pencil crayons. I suggest a set of 24 or more in order to give you the best variety in color. And of course, a handy dandy sharpener. Gotta keep those pencils sharp. In today's video, we'll be working on the Goddess coloring page. This is a very special page for me, as this is the first page I created for the book. I love drawing women with horns and tattoos. Before we get started with the coloring, let's pick out our colors. For the background, I'm going to be using 3 different shades of blue, a light, mid-tone, and dark tone. I will also have 2 tones of purple, a dark and a light, 3 shades of yellow, a light, mid-tone, and dark tone. Then for the goddess herself, in her hair alone, I'm going to be using a cream, blue, pink, green, and purple, 2 shades of beige for her skin tone, a light and a mid-tone, 2 shades of brown for the horns, a light and a dark tone, 2 tones of turquoise for her dress, a light and a mid-tone, and as usual, I'll be using my white and sepia just to keep them handy for my lights and shadows. Now that I have my colors, let's get started. As I do with all my drawings, I'm going to cover the whole drawing with a light coloring to make sure that I've decided where each color is going to go. The base coat is just for planning. It helps me to get the lightest tones right away, and it helps me plan out my drawing. We are always building up the color to get darker, always building from light to dark. In the hair, I make sure to alternate my colors to create a light rainbow effect. In all honesty, the hair is not going to get much darker than this. My goddess herself will be fairly light, and my background will be much darker just to make her pop. With the base color filled in, let's move on to the background. I want to make it look like she's glowing a bit, so I'm going to start with my lightest shade and work around her. I create a glow circumference to guide me in the exterior of the glow. In the exterior of the glow, I do a very light coloring, which will be blended in with the darker blues later on. Once the light tone is done, I go in with my mid-tone blues, starting from the very edge all the way to my light blue. When I go over the light shade with my darker blue, I make sure not to press too hard, and I blend it in with that light blue so that the 2 colors can merge properly. Once my midtones are done, I go back in with my darkest blue and start from the very edge, working my way towards the goddess to darken the background. I don't go too far in as I don't want it to be too dark. Once the blue is done, I move on to the details in the background, and I will be coloring them yellow. I start with the lightest tone, concentrating on the edges which are facing the goddess, which will be the lightest areas. Then I start from the edges furthest away and bring in my darker shade, making sure that every portion of the shape is colored in. Then I go in with my very darkest yellow and add those dark shadows at the edges away from the goddess. When I get to the crescent moon shape on the bottom, I switch it up and go with my purples. I fill the background with a portion of the purple going from dark to light. I go about it a little differently, just starting with the darkest tones because I want the shadows to be more predominant than the light tones. In the blue section, I wanted the light tones to be more dominant than the dark tones, so I started with the light tones, working my way darker. You can switch between the 2 techniques. Both of them are correct. It all depends as where you want your emphasis to be. Once it's the right shade, I go back into my yellows and finish the details using my 3 tones of yellow. Once I'm satisfied with the yellow, it's time to move on to my goddess. Starting with her skin, I take my darkest beige and start defining the shadows. I take into consideration the candles on the top of her head and in her hands, the hair that will cast shadows on her body, the clothing which also casts shadows on her skin. I place a light coloring of the dark beige. I go over the specks of her skin, as I already know they will be much darker than this beige, so covering them up with the brown will be easy. I build up the darkness slowly, as I want her skin to be pale. With my light cream color, I go into the areas which will be the lightest and have the highlights and add that cream color before the beige. Then I go over the whole skin with that light beige to blend in all the colors. I can then go back into the skin, and wherever some of the lightness has been lost, I add some white to brighten it up a bit. Once that's done, I move on to the horns. I cover the whole horn with a light brown so that I can darken it slowly. I want the highlights to be the focus, so starting with the light color makes sense to me. Then using my dark brown, I begin to darken the interior portion, thinking about the candle light, how the horns turn, and the different bulges of the horns. To emphasize the highlights, I go in with my white just to bring them back to the foreground. Once the horns are done, I move on to the hair. With the color already in the hair, I'm just going to use my sepia to add the shadows, making sure I take the shape of the hair into consideration, and I concentrate my shadows mainly around the ears, where the hair folds, and under the headdress. Then I cover the entirety of the hair with my white to blend all the colors together. If I find that some of the colors have disappeared, I go back in with them just to bring them back out. However, I use the colors of the hair very lightly as I don't want this hair to be dark at all. Then I work on the dress, taking into consideration the candle light and how the hair falls onto the dress, working from my light to dark. Blending the turquoise tones with the whites, darkening it to my taste. The rest I go with what feels right. I fill in the freckles with a solid brown color. Then I concentrate on the shadows on the candles, making sure that there are shadows on the bottom where they meet the hand and a little bit where any of the candles overlap. Then I cover them with that nice cream color. In the flame itself, I make sure that the darkest yellow is at the bottom of the flame and the lightest yellow is at the top to create a nice gradient. And the headdress, I just make sure that I take into consideration the light and the dark. If I need to make anything darker, I use my sepia. And if I've lost some of my highlights and want to bring them back in, I use my white. And with that, we're done. My very special goddess is ready. Coloring is all about fun. And if you're finding that it's stressful, take a break and go back to it later. It's never a good idea to rush it. Art has taught me a great deal about patience and learning to step back when I need to. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope this brings your coloring skills to the next level. Remember to have fun with your coloring, and remember where your light source is. Please share your finished drawing on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or TikTok using the hashtag MAGAMColoring2022. And with that, we will see you next time. Happy coloring!